here today to talk about AI in the SOC. This is separating operational value from vendor hype and how security leaders should judge AI claims in the modern MDR. And I cannot think of anyone who would know more about this subject. The guy who's always preaching me AI stuff is Anand Ramanathan. So, Anand, with that, I'll let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you for that warm introduction, Charlie. Welcome to everyone on the call, whatever time zone you're in. I'm sure some are in the morning time zone and some have crossed into the afternoon time zone. And thank you for joining today's session. As Charlie mentioned, my name is Anand. I've been in the cybersecurity space for a very long time. And at Deepwatch, my role is to include both the AI that's developed by our product team, along with the expertise of our cyber operations team to deliver extremely effective security outcomes for our customers. And we as a company have been doing this for a decade. And as a result, we have substantial firsthand experience in leveraging AI in the SOC. For those of you in the audience who spent any amount of time reviewing cybersecurity solutions over the last 12 to 18 months, I'm sure all of you have seen AI is now the acronym that's appended to every product sheet, every pitch deck, every marketing campaign. But as security leaders, we know that we can't really manage operations on hype. We need to manage it on metrics, the risk reduction that comes with any technology use, and address the capacity challenges that we always have within our teams. The purpose of this particular webinar is to give you a practical executive lens that cuts through some of this marketing noise. And we're going to look at specifically how is AI impacting Security Operations Center and the modern managed detection and response MDR workflows, separating what, sounds good on a sales call from what really shifts the needle when these things are deployed in production. Okay. With that, let's go to the next slide, where we know that every SOC today, when I say SOC, we're talking about security operations centers, is currently operating under intense pressure, right? The threat landscape is now more active than ever before, thanks to all the new capabilities, especially around AI that's now in the hands of our adversaries. In addition, we have a well-documented talent shortage, massive amount of sprawl from new tools, from new platforms, often many of whom don't talk to each other, and an overwhelming volume of alerts. That's not new to us. So therefore, SOC leaders are continuing to face the pressure to modernize, automate, and prove that they're using AI to find more efficiencies to manage through the workload. But here's where we have firsthand see the disconnect. AI tools are evolving at breakneck speed. Every other week, every other month, there's a new AI model that supposedly is much better than the previous one. But yet, the day-to-day reality of the analyst isn't getting better. And everybody asks why, because I think the market, we believe, has confused output with outcomes. AI is great at generating a summary, but a summary faster isn't as helpful as making a better decision. And that's what we are continuously seeing is surfacing more signals just creates a bigger haystack, something that the analyst needs to sort through, and it doesn't give you necessarily better prioritization. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what are we really seeing as AI is deeply getting introduced into the SOC. And frankly, we believe in stopping, treating SOC AI as just a single monolith, if you will, and to really start thinking about, how we categorize AI into the different maturity types that we see in the market. And from our standpoint, we are seeing it bucketed into three areas: what we would call useful AI, what we would call autonomous AI, and really what we call kind of productive AI. A lot of the useful AI really focuses on what we would recommend or what we would suggest is in the individual task level. As we know, in the SOC, our analysts do lots of individual tasks, some of which are time consuming and can be quite a bit of work for a given analyst. Things like enriching data, things like calling into a particular repository of data and then being able to analyze that, potentially summarizing the data that you looked at and the analysis that followed, right? And that's where useful AI has a role to play. The industry is obviously talking a lot about autonomous AI, which is all about removing the human from the loop entirely, and that AI will execute all the actions independently. And we'll talk a little bit about the pitfalls and the rationale for why people are talking about autonomous AI being the nirvana for all the SOC challenges that we all face within our teams as we speak. And then we'll talk a little bit about productive AI. Productive AI really targets system level, really re-architecting how workflows inside a real world SOC changes to drive collective efficiency. And in our mind, each category is trying to solve a different operational problem and is carried with it, vastly different risks associated with it. So why don't we double click on each of these categories, starting with useful AI. As we mentioned, useful AI is what you are seeing in most what we would call co-pilot, chatbot type AI interactions today. It is great at doing things like a tactical localized task. You can read a wall of text. It can map raw telemetry to a MITRE attack technique. It can write a great summary of what a specific PowerShell script does. There is genuine capability upside by doing all the tasks that I just mentioned. However, what we find is capability automatically does not mean productivity. Let me give you an example. If one of our analysts has to read a 500-word AI summary of some enrichment that happened, then the enrichment could be calling into a whole source of intelligence capabilities and providing a summary of what that IP or URL or domain or attachment hash meant, whether you called in a virus total log or whether you looked at any other open source intelligence or whether you just summarized the raw log information. It's not as helpful because you haven't really saved the analyst as much time. In fact, you could even argue that you have actually increased the cognitive load as a result of that long summary that is, additional work for the analyst. So what we find is more information is not always the same as a better decision. We do believe useful AI helps and it serves as a feature, but not as a strong operational lever. It doesn't solve what we think is the core bottleneck from a decision-making standpoint, the friction that our analysts find as they are trying to solve problems that they are faced with every day. Let's now move to talk a little bit about the next category in terms of autonomous AI. If you talk to a number of vendors in the industry, and there's a lot of vendors who have branded themselves as autonomous AI in the AI SOC world, they promise, especially with the numerous analogies that we see to autonomous driving. For those of you who've been in a Waymo or in a self-driving Tesla, the analogy is that it can drive itself. The theory says let the AI automatically investigate, contain, and remediate threats without human bottlenecks. And while the theory is sound, in high volume, low context environments, and it sounds incredibly attractive because it promises infinite scale and zero latency, what we find is in reality, autonomy without strict guardrails, absolute transparency, and easy validation introduces severe operational and business risk. Let's take an example. What if an AI system isolates a critical production server because it found some level of adversarial activity? And let's say that happened during peak business hours. To Charlie's point, while Prime Day is going on, what if an operational server is taken offline based on an AI model that made a given judgment call? Who's accountable for that? And what we find in our conversations with customers, no SOC leader is ready at this point to trust AI and take on this level of responsibility. And oftentimes the question is, if your engineering team, your security teams cannot trace why a system reached a given conclusion, we find that trust instantly breaks down. And the metric that we must evaluate in these situations is not what the AI can do on its own, but whether the business can safely trust, govern, and explain its actions. And so while autonomous AI is the nirvana, and we may get to it at some point in time, we don't believe that that is where the reality of security operations exists as we see it today. So let's move to the third category that we talked about earlier, and that brings us to productive AI. And really, this is where we believe security leaders should be spending their time, their budgets. Productive AI just doesn't focus on a given alert, a given isolation mechanism. It actually focuses on the operational framework that exists within a SOC. And it is measured entirely by systemic operational leverage. Now, how do you know that AI is actually being productive? And for that, we believe that there are 6 questions that we need to be asking whenever we think of introducing a solution to solve that problem. The first is, does it actually improve how work gets done inside actual workflows that a SOC is working on today? Does it reduce the manual workload across the entire life cycle? As we know, a SOC just doesn't do one step in an alert. There's some series of steps, and you want to make sure that the manual workload is reduced across the entire set of things that an analyst does. Does it drastically strengthen signal prioritization? Right? As we know, an analyst has to do a number of given tasks within a given SOC workflow, and you want to make sure that they are focused on the most important things that they should be doing. So that's kind of how you process that particular alert, you process that particular activity with the prioritization that you need. Does it shorten the mean time to triage? We know the amount of time triage takes. You will see a lot of vendor claims around how their triage process is the fastest. And there's truth to that. And there's element of mean time to triage that you want to really measure. You just don't want to take a given triage and a given alert triage and see that it completed in 2 minutes, where a multitude of other alerts took much longer time frames. The 5th question is it driving consistency? Right? It's not about just doing a given activity at a much faster speed. You want to think about, is it driving consistency in how you are doing a number of activities? And is your responses consistent? Are they formatted consistently? Can you execute on a consistent basis? And finally, and very crucially, does it fit natively into how your analysts are already operating? If the solution requires you to do something completely unnatural, it is highly likely that the adoption of that particular activity tends to not have the kind of impact that you're trying to get done. So any solution needs to work within the model that your analysts are already operating in. And we do believe that if you implement a productive AI solution, It can change the economics of the SOC. It can help your analyst move faster and come up with a much more accurate decision without completely changing the entire workflow or their entire day-to-day activities. And that's the model that we do believe has tremendous advantages as it relates to the use of AI. Now, let's talk a little bit about the core mistake that we often see SOC analysts or SOC teams, make when they are thinking about introducing AI into their workflows. The first one that we see is confusing speed and enrichment, as we talked about earlier, with true decision support. Speed sounds very attractive. I can do things faster than before, and that often is a very attractive value proposition when you initially think about AI. I know many of you probably in the audience use a ChatGPT, you use a Claude, or you use Gemini, or the variety of other AI tools. And it sounds extremely attractive when the first time you ask a question and it comes back with what seems like a pretty relevant answer. What would have taken you potentially multiple searches or multiple reviews to get to that answer. And so that speed sounds, like I said, very attractive to start with. And many of the AI tools do things with speed. I know many of you probably have used AI to give it a gobbledygook of text and have it summarize. And within seconds, it summarizes something really fast. And that sounds like a very, very useful way of using AI. And they do. They can summarize alerts faster. They can surface data quicker. They can make messy amount of logs much easier to read. And they are very helpful. And that can have an impact from an analyst perspective, from a human validation perspective. But oftentimes we find that that is fundamentally incomplete. If you're looking for true operational value, we believe that the true operational value lives with decision support. Value shows up when a system is able to correlate disparate signals across different domains. It's applying very specific business and operational context to a given activity that the analyst might be involving in, and or guides the analyst's next action with explicit confidence and with prioritization. When those things start to happen, we see that the operational value is significantly amplified and makes it much, much easier for the analyst to conduct the set of activities that they do in a given day. So let's talk a little bit about the workflows on the next slide. This is what we feel productive AI looks like when actually deployed in practice in a real SOC. It's not just an add-on widget or a chat window bolted on to a legacy SIEM, a legacy SOAR product, or any other solution that you might be using within your SOC. It actually requires kind of an architectural choice, an architectural commitment in terms of how you are going to evolve the SOC. If you think about it, in practice, a SOC has many fragmented signals. Telemetry coming from a whole series of solutions, your endpoints, your identity providers, your cloud environments, increasingly even all the AI applications that you are using within your enterprise. And you might be looking at these fragmented signals separately. You might be looking at them inside a SIEM because that's your central logging solution for looking at all the telemetry. And instead of just throwing all of them to an analyst to manually stitch them together, we believe that if you have a productive AI architecture, it brings them together into what we are calling a unified context. So if you have an alert, you have a case that you are working on, it builds that entire investigation narrative. It calculates the likely severity based on a whole series of correlated indicators. So it is making a number of what we would call kind of micro decisions to help the analyst conduct the rest of the tasks that require human judgment, that requires expert validation. And that gets us to the next step in a given SOC workflow around better action. A SOC analyst is now, thanks to the work that AI has done in assembling the unified context, can quickly see what are the next steps? What are the next things that they need to do to fundamentally decide whether that particular alert is something they need to take action, or as we know, alerts are often false positives and therefore do not require any action on the analyst behalf. It also ensures that there is consistency in the triage process. Every alert has the due diligence that it is required to ensure that we take the appropriate set of next steps. And often we are seeing a faster response, an accelerated response. They're not always going and digging for evidence. They are executing what we think is a validated path forward based on the experience of the analyst, based on what we have seen before in our customers' environments. So let's go to the next slide and talk about Gen AI specifically and where it helps and where it does not. It's an incredible tool. I can't tell you the number of times I use ChatGPT in a given day or Gemini in a given day. Those are terrific productivity enhancers, but we must be deeply honest about where their strength exists and where their security or the structural limitations exist, I should say, in a security environment. Let's look at first where it actually helps. It is phenomenal in translating technical jargon into readable context. I talked a little bit about earlier on where you can take a PowerShell script and AI can do a fantastic job of telling you exactly what that particular PowerShell script is doing. It is excelling at summarizing findings. It does take complex event logs and makes it much easier to read from a human narrative standpoint. And it can even today draft some adaptive workflows to reduce some repetitive work that analysts do. But what we are seeing today, as we kind of are using it in real practice, it can change the fidelity, the data quality, or the underlying decision logic of the platform. It can generate truth out of bad data. You still need to collect the right evidence, to collect the right data, because otherwise it will just summarize bad data, do it in a beautiful manner, but it will continue to do bad data summarization. It can kind of fundamentally change or replace the logic layer. And the one thing that we have seen time and time again is it does not eliminate the need for expert human validation, especially when you are making high impact response decisions, like I mentioned earlier about potentially, taking a production server offline. Those are really impactful decisions. And we see very much the need for expertise and human validation when those kind of decisions need to be taken. Go to the next slide. I really think that, the argument about is it AI versus humans is a false argument. It's really a question much more about division of labor. AI really should be making our defenders, the SOC analysts in your team, the SOC analysts that we have in our team, much more effective while making sure that human accountability is very much resident, especially in situations where there's ambiguity, there's business impact, and response decisions matter. The goal of technology has always been to make expert defenders more effective. And what we want to make sure is that AI is handling the cognitive grunt work, assembling the complex chain of activity, adding that context, connecting suspicious behavior, and recommending the logical next step that might be drawn from the analysis that always was done. The human or the expert must always retain the ultimate decision-making authority. In all the alerts that we process here at Deepwatch, and we process many thousands of alerts, we have seen that only an expert can validate the intent, weigh the localized business impact, and determine if an aggressive containment action is appropriate given the operational context. And in cybersecurity, that line, and it's a very fine line between assistance and accountability, is fundamentally what keeps your business safe at the end of the day. So go to the next slide, Charlie. What's the recommendation for security leaders, right? It's not stop asking if a platform uses AI. Pretty much every platform does today. And that's going to be real not only today, it's going to be real for a long time to come. The question that you should be asking is around how does it improve the SOC? How do you get to a much more resilient operation? And therefore, with that in mind, we would encourage you to challenge them with 5 specific operational questions. First and foremost, how does it reduce the analyst burden, or does it just repackage the same work into a different text block? Does it measurably improve the prioritization and the overall quality of the decision making that a particular SOC team is making? Does it fit naturally into the tools and the workflows that your SOC is already using? How does it preserve the accountability and the expert validation that are so critical for your organization? And then lastly, the transparency. Can you show empirical evidence of these outcomes actually working in real production environments? In our opinion, your guiding mantra should be always be AI should make your SOC better, not just more easier. So let's finally move to our Deepwatch point of view, right? As I mentioned earlier, we've been doing managed detection and response for a decade now. And we have been leveraging technology, both automation, Gen AI, and even machine learning models for quite a while now. And we've always believed that the success of a given technology is not the amount of activity it creates or the number of alerts that it generates. It is always been better triage, better prioritization, and better response quality. And we speak from experience. We've tried many different things. We believe in experimentation. That's kind of how technology evolves within any security operations center. And we've come back with 3 pillars that are really important. First and foremost, any technology, and especially something like Gen AI, must seamlessly integrate into real world operational workflows, rather than sitting as a fragmented silo on top of a broken process, right? That's really important. That's where you get the kind of productivity gains that we talked about earlier. The second one is around being decision-centered. The technology must really assist the analyst in clearing ambiguity and delivering immediate context and driving that actionability. And finally, human accountable or expert accountable, as I like to call it. We truly believe expertise remains critical when you are handling security incidents, and it becomes indispensable wherever business context, nuance, and strategic impact comes to play. And like I said, we've been doing this across a multitude of customers. We run our own security operations center. We have our own detection engineers. We have threat response experts. We have threat intelligence experts. And we do threat hunting for our customer base. So we do the gamut of what a typical security operations center would do within the organization. And we're doing this across hundreds of customers. So what we see is a very broad set of activities that a given security operations center needs to do. And as we talked about earlier, there is immense potential in new technologies, especially around Gen AI, influencing our ability to drive those security outcomes for our customers, where it comes through very thoughtful way of leveraging those technologies within the SOC workflows and the types of decision support that it is helping us do every day on behalf of our customers. And with that, we appreciate all of you spending some time with us this morning or afternoon, as the time zone might be. And we look forward to any questions that you might have.
All right. Yeah, you guys, if we have any questions, throw them in the Q&A box there. In the meantime, while we're sitting here waiting, if you guys have any questions, I'm going to do the drawing for the AirPod Pro 3. I think I said that right, AirPod Pro 3. So I have a little spin thing here I'm just going to hit, and it's going to work, and then we're going to let it go. So here we go. Again, any questions, you guys just let us know. Anand, that was excellent. Again, I can't tell you how much Anand preaches his AI workflows to us all the time. So, all right, here we go. Coming to an end. Jason Powell. So, Jason Powell, we have your information. We'll reach out to you and get that over to you. I think that they'll send you a link so you can be able to do your stuff. But I don't know if anybody has any more questions. Anand, do you have anything else you want to end with? I'm going to stop sharing here.
No, all I would end with is, I would encourage everybody in the audience to be embracing this new technology. We do believe that this new technology under, AI has that tremendous potential, but it's really important to harness that potential in a manner that's going to be effective at what your experts within your organizations are doing. And, we would love to talk to you if you are interested in digging a bit deeper into kind of how we leverage this within Deepwatch. And even though we shared a bunch of learnings, we can absolutely double click into those learnings with you if you are interested. And we look forward to those conversations.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if you would like to connect with Anand, he's on LinkedIn. I'm sure you can find him there. And with that, I will bring this webinar to a close. I want to thank everybody for being here today, for your time. And like Anand said, if it's your afternoon, your morning, or whatever. And if you guys need anything else from us, we're going to do another webinar. We'll try to do these at least once a month so you guys can be educated on what's new and what's coming out, not only with us, but just within the industry itself. So with that, I'm going to bring it to a close, and everybody enjoy the rest of your week.